Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Saturday HOA Brunch, presented by Angius&Terry, LLP. Please sit back, relax, and join Brad Epstein and Jonathan Broderick for an hour of entertaining information about HOAs and HOA law.
Good morning, Sacramento. I look at the clock. It's 9:06. I'm sorry if there's a little bit of exhaustion in my voice. Just barely made it in studio, but we do have Viana Barbu here with us. As always, yes. And Viana, if someone wants to call in and discuss with us Homeowners Association's issues and questions that they might have, what would be the number to call?
Please call us at 888-923-1380. And we really, really want to hear from our listeners. We know a lot of you live in HOAs out there, so give us a call, ask us questions, or tell us your stories about what's going on in your HOA. We'd really like to hear from you.
The Clout, the attorney in the studio today, Viana Barbu. And then we are honored, last-minute call-up. He was on the show a couple of weeks ago. We're excited because he is kind of a kingpin in the Homeowners Association industry. Mr. Garth Leone joins us, too, and he has the best face for radio.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I am a legend in my own mind also. So been around the business a long time. I did get the call up to the big leagues. Mr. Brad is out today, so I think I get weather detail, don't I?
Right. And the forecast today?
I'm guessing we're going with balmy. That's usually what it looks like, but it's going to get triple digits today.
Yeah.
And I think air quality is going to be borderline unhealthy this afternoon. So for those of you that are cleaning out your garage every weekend, I'd get that work done early so you can sit on the couch and watch baseball later tonight.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, unfortunately, he has a busy schedule. I think he's down in the Bay Area for like a bar mitzvah. That's what Brad's got going on today.
Is he performing? Is he the magician?
No, he's attending, a family member.
Okay.
Member. So, and then we've got, of course, in the back, Frank Jolly, the legend on the sticks. So we always know we're in good comfort when it comes to production. Well, this is the Homeowners Association Hour, right? Every week while we do the Saturday HOA brunches, we talk about hot topics and issues regarding Homeowners Association. Some of the things we've discussed before, HOA banking, 60-minute board meetings with the great Rolf Crocker, insurance with Garth previously regarding the Hyman case and some workman's comp stuff. We talk about the industry, organizations, elections, and try to help out board members and members living in community associations better understand the day-to-day operations. Right, Viana?
Right, and guess what we'll be talking about today?
Homeowners associations.
Yep, just
Good
like
guess.
every week.
Excellent guess.
We're going to be talking about do's and don'ts of board meetings, which I think is actually a really, really important topic. Do's and don'ts for board members and also maybe for owners when they show up at board meetings and just everything goes haywire from there. Everything goes
I've seen some YouTube videos in Southern California, some like fist fights actually breaking out at these board meetings, or boards not letting members in and the members not understanding that they have the right to an executive session to meet with the manager and the attorneys to talk about, some private issues going on in the association. So they can get chaotic, right?
I think somebody got punched in the face in one of those stories we covered quite a few weeks ago.
Right.
One of those trying to get into an executive session. So, yeah, we'll hopefully give you some tips to prevent that from happening in your association.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I've been to many board meetings where things haven't gone so great, and of course the insurance side of things, D&O coverage. You hear about the problems that happen within the association, and sometimes those things boil up in the meeting. So I got a few good stories.
You have some good stories. How long have you been in this industry?
Oh gosh, since '92, I think. So,
yeah, and you have a definition for what you call this experiment,
yes,
right?
It is the greatest social experiment of modern time. It's actually the social experiment turned institution, as our buddy Rolf Crocker says. So, yeah, it's exciting.
He's probably stringing the guitar right now listening. I could imagine he's down there at Mountain Ranch. He's probably got himself a little breakfast, and he's working on some of his tunes because he's a heck of a musician, right?
Well, he's about to go on tour. I think we're going to be talking about that later on the show. We got Sid Vicious, CID Vicious is the name of the band, and we're going to be playing at the National Ignite Tour. I think Rolf is going to be featured on rhythm guitar.
All right.
Oh, that's amazing.
And possibly lead vocals on a few songs. So
that does sound exciting. So, Viana, today, board meetings, do's and don'ts, right? So should we brush everybody up a little bit on what's required for when a meeting is going to be held and some of the good legal tidbits that I know that you're just dying to educate our listenership with?
Yeah, I'm going to start by mentioning the Davis-Stirling Act because it's everybody's favorite part of the Civil Code, I'm sure. So the Davis-Stirling Act is the part of the California Civil Code that relates to how associations are supposed to operate. So they operate as corporations, and most are incorporated as nonprofit corporations. And then they have to comply with the provisions of the Davis-Stirling Act, which is part of the Civil Code, again, that covers how HOAs operate. So in terms of board meetings, there's obviously, there has to be a notice provided to the homeowners that a board meeting is going to be held. And the requirements for that notice are found in the Davis-Stirling Act. So if notice has to be given at least of the time and place of the board meeting at least 4 days before the meeting. So that's a given. You can't just
posted, right?
Right. So the notice has to be either posted, mailed, provided in a newsletter, or if some associations have a TV program, a local TV program, and a TV announcement. However, if the meeting is going to be an emergency meeting, then you don't have to give notice.
Okay.
So if the meeting
I think that's isn't that provision 4920? I'm pretty sure that's it.
Wow, that's a lot of numbers for me to remember. I just remember if you want to call in 888-923-1380, but the Civil Code sections in the Davis-Stirling Act way above my head.
Now, I can't carry Viana's briefcase when it comes to the law, but I do have the script in front of me that tells me that's section 4920.
Yeah. Sorry, I was tweeting.
For those people that really, really want to get into the numbers and read this beautiful provision parts of the Civil Code, yeah, it's definitely 4920. So if the association is going to break out into an executive session meeting, and if the meeting is just for executive session purposes, then the notice only has to be given for 2 days ahead of time.
Yeah, and that executive session, like we mentioned, is exclusively for the board of directors, the board members, possibly to speak with their attorney about maybe something like litigation or a contract that the board's going to make a decision on, and also to meet and confer with the manager in kind of a private setting. So there's not, the distraction of the Yahoo that has, 40 dogs and is all pissed off all the time because...
And confidential issues as well, right? So if they've got an issue with a homeowner that would be deemed confidential, does the Act, Viana, spell out the things you can and can't go into executive session for, or is it kind of at the discretion of the board?
Yeah, there are specific sections, issues that have to be discussed in executive session, and then there are some issues that the owner can request to meet an executive session for. For example, a disciplinary hearing generally doesn't have to be conducted in executive session, although most associations prefer to do that. But if an owner requests it to be an executive session, then they have to adjourn and meet an executive session.
Now, are there things that if the board thinks they want to go to executive session, but it should be an open meeting topic, or perhaps it's on the open meeting topic agenda, are there things that they can't talk about in executive session, or they kind of have the latitude to play their best judgment at the board level?
Well, the Civil Code doesn't actually say that there are things you absolutely cannot discuss in executive session. There's no such provision. So it really is kind of at the latitude of the board, but I think they should err on the side of caution and discuss things in an open meeting that are supposed to be on the open meeting agenda, because then they risk looking like they're doing some secretive business or some kind of fraud or corruption or anything like that. And in HOAs that those rumors are rampant. So
yeah, I mean, clearly that's the intent of this kind of language. And it's, we operate nationally, and the many states have adopted the same kind of Open Meeting Act situation where they want the homeowners to know what's being talked about and being able to participate in the meeting.
Yeah, they want it to be an informative community. But and then there's another note on our little cheat sheet that we have in front of us, that an emergency meeting, now they don't have to post notice for an emergency meeting, correct? So this would be an example of something that happened in the community that needs immediate attention, and the board can go ahead and move forward. They can confer and they can make a decision that's going to assist the association in moving forward and be efficient, right?
Right. So an emergency meeting would happen in the event that, let's say, a water pipe bursts, and they get notice that a water pipe burst, that they don't have time to wait 4 days to post the notice and to address this issue. It needs to be addressed immediately. So the board will meet, as soon as possible and discuss what to do about that, who to call, how to resolve the problem. But it could be for a variety of reasons, but generally it has to be a pretty serious emergency that cannot wait to be addressed for the regular notice time period. So
what do you think, Garth? Would an emergency be the board of directors is in charge of a security gate out front in the community, and the gate is not working? Can the boards freak out, and can they say, oh man, we can't have this situation? Would you classify that as an emergency? Security for the community?
I think that any life safety issue, I think, is something to consider. I think that the intent of allowing him for emergency meeting is to kind of back up the idea that the meetings are supposed to be open. So And we talk about this quite a bit, where if two board members are having an email conversation with each other, does that constitute discussion about business of the association? I know attorneys vary on that opinion. So I think that the intent behind the Open Meeting Act, allowing people to understand what's going on at the operating of their association as homeowners, there needs to be provisions where things come up where, you, like you said, Viana, you just cannot have 4 days notice or 2 days notice of executive session. You got to deal with things. So I think from protecting the board's perspective, I think it's probably best to actually declare this is something that we feel as the board rises to an emergency. We're exercising our emergency meeting provisions, and we're going to talk about it and get some, and take some action on this. So
yeah, and one thing worth mentioning is that for the notice of board meetings, an agenda of what will be discussed at the meeting needs to be included in that notice. And I think that might be something that some associations, maybe with newer board members, forget to do. So we'll talk about more do's and don'ts when we come back.
Yeah, more do's and don'ts with our special guest call-up Garth Leone and Viana Barbu. We'll be back, 1380 The Answer.
If your community association has a good relationship with their current management company, you can stop listening. However, if you are struggling with your current service provider, we'd love to talk with you to see if Omni Community Management would be a good fit. Transparency, education, communication, and trust are just 4 of the qualities that set Omni apart. This is Rolf Crocker, CEO of Omni. Call us at 916-965-8964. That's 916-965-8964. Online at omni-mgt.com. That's omni-mgt.com. Omni Community Management, your friend in the community association management industry for over 20 years.
Have you ever heard of the saying, a person's home is their castle? Of course you have. But sometimes a construction defect can turn your castle into a catastrophe. If this happens to you, you need proper and professional representation. You need Angius&Terry, LLP. For over 30 years, the attorneys at Angius&Terry have been effectively serving homeowners and community associations, recovering more than $500 million on behalf of their clients. Angius&Terry strives to ensure that your construction defect claims are prosecuted in an aggressive and cost-effective manner. Angius&Terry will also continue to work with homeowners and community associations after the construction defect claims are concluded to make sure that the money received from builders is spent wisely and that your interests are protected during the repair process. Don't let a construction defect turn your castle into a catastrophe. Call Angius&Terry LLP today at 916-567-1400. That's 916-567-1400. Online at angius-terry.com. Angius&Terry LLP.
This is AM 1380. The Answer.
You're listening to the Saturday HOA Brunch presented by Angius&Terry LLP. And now your hosts, Brad Epstein and Jonathan Broderick on AM 1380, The Answer.
Hey, we're back, 9:19. It's hours just flying by. Just a wealth of knowledge regarding common interest developments. Homeowners Associations, hot topic every Saturday from 9 to 10. And we had a little bit of a discussion during the break of how important the agenda is when it comes to these meetings, right, Garth?
Yeah, so it looks like, Viana, that we've got to post the notice 4 days prior. It's got to contain the agenda. So the question I have for you is, I know we talked about the emergency stuff before the break. If there's an emergency, they can sort of declare an emergency and have a meeting about it. But what if something comes up between the time that the agenda is handed out and the actual meeting that's maybe it's not known, but it's not necessarily an emergency? How do they deal with that in terms of wanting to take care of that business at that upcoming board meeting? Do they have the ability to do that, or how does that work?
Well, sometimes associations post the notice of the meeting way before the required 4 days, so they'll put it out 10 days before. So if this item comes up, maybe it's still within 4 days of the meeting, then what you might want to do is post an amended agenda if you still have the time. And if not, then what oftentimes happens is one of the board members or the manager might bring it up at the meeting and mention kind of what the situation is, but leave it for a decision for the next meeting. So they'll basically propose this item for the agenda for the next meeting.
And Garth, wouldn't you say with your experience that having an agenda that is thorough but efficient is kind of a recipe for success during a board meeting?
Absolutely. And I think that getting back to the intent of what the meeting notice acts and provisions are all about, and like I said, it's across the country. I think the idea is that we can't just decide a day before the meeting after we posted an agenda that has 6 items, we're going to add a 7th item and take action on that item, because what I've heard is that, the idea is the homeowner goes by the clubhouse, sees the posting, or goes to the website, sees the posting, says, oh, there's 3 items on here. None of those really, I'm not really too concerned about any of those, but replacement of the landscaping contractor that comes up, we get notice that 2 days before the meeting that the landscape contractor is, quitting our association and we need a new one. That could be something that person's, really interested in.
Oh, yeah, they're worried about who's trimming the hedges out front.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so generally speaking, you'd have to postpone that item until the next meeting so that you can give proper notice to all the owners in case they do want to attend and be informed.
Yeah, and this is something that we see on the D&O side. One of the most prolific claims in directors and officers insurance is arbitrary enforcement of the documents, or not following proper protocol as spelled out by the local state legislation. So this to me is something where you could create a D&O situation pretty easily, and it seems kind of, I don't know, almost burdensome that we have to, think through each item that we're going to talk about at the meeting. And it's just the landscaper. It's not that big of a deal. We need a new landscape guy. We can't wait till next month to make a decision. But at the same time, I think the idea is that homeowners need to be aware of what's going on at those meetings and have an opportunity to show up and voice their opinion.
Those are their assessments. Those are assessments that are going to be paying. And if you think about some of the communities, beautiful communities that we have in California, just for an example, if you go to a master plan community like Sun City, Lincoln Hills, I mean, you're talking about some fairly large contracts when it comes to landscapers. So these are not decisions that you generally would make on a whim. I mean, when you're talking about, or a community that's going out to bid for a multi-million-dollar reconstruction project, you might want to prepare and do a little bit of research and review the agenda and get some ideas going in your head before you just show up and you make a vote. I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
Jonathan, actually, the example you used, the landscaping example we used, is actually a good point to make about executive sessions, which, Garth, you mentioned earlier about the different issues that you can address in executive session. So if we're talking about formation of a contract, that's actually an item that usually is addressed in executive session. It's one of the items that the Davis-Stirling Act spells out as one that boards should meet in executive session. And the reason for that is that generally there's a possibility of slander or libel out there if you're discussing like the pros and cons of different companies you might hire. So you don't want to do that in an open meeting.
You also might have the situation where a gentleman stands up and he's advocating for his cousin Bill to get the landscape contract. I mean, obviously he just announced it, so he's disclosed to everyone in the meeting that he's related to the contractor or landscaper.
Right.
But there's everybody kind of, that's in the membership that you just got to make sure that they're making a decision or their opinion is on the best, in the best
interest of the association.
Of the association.
And I think there's a fine line too, and some of the things where I've seen boards get in trouble. The boards to me walk this fine line of being an appointed representative of the homeowners that are tasked with doing the work of making the decisions, and then that the other side of that equation is getting input from the homeowners. So something like a landscape contract, I think that's a really good example. We're not going to talk about the meat and potatoes of the actual contract in the general meeting, but if we say there's going to be a transition in landscaping, we want to, we're going to have a town hall meeting type. We want to get your input about, what did the last guys do really well? What did you not like? What kind of changes would you recommend? Getting input from the homeowners. I think that boards oftentimes don't spend enough time doing that kind of stuff, and that sort of creates this idea that they're operating behind this closed door. Nobody knows what they're up to.
Well, and even now in hard times with water shortage, it's possible that you might be transitioning some of your landscape contractors, since that seems to be the contractor of choice for this discussion. But hey, we're bringing these guys in because we really need to do some things to ramp up our xeriscape to help conserve water, so that we can abide by all of the legislation that's coming out, because that is a serious issue right now in associations, is cutting on your water usage in all of your common areas. So, good point.
Definitely. And I wanted to mention some of the other items that the Davis-Stirling Act mentions that the board should meet an executive session for. So definitely litigation, matters relating to formation of contracts with third parties, which we've mentioned, like a landscaping contract, member discipline, personnel matters, or to meet with a member upon the member's request regarding the member's payment of assessment. So if that is one item that the member would have to request to meet an executive session if they want to enter into a payment plan for their assessment. Member discipline also generally is met in executive session, but
so like a
that's
hearing?
but that's at the member's request.
Okay.
Although most associations do them in executive session anyway.
So, Viana, how accurate or how on point do you think most boards operate in relation to this kind of requirement from Davis-Stirling? You think it's pretty good penetration, or you think most of them are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants? What do you think?
Well, I think they try, especially if they have good managers. They usually are very compliant. But sometimes I think even with managers, things kind of slide by a little bit in terms of their requirements. I think they're probably 80 to 90% compliant. I think most of the boards I see, especially the well-managed ones.
And the challenge that I would imagine some managers have, and all managers that we work with are great managers, that is kind of reining them back in and making sure that they follow those guidelines and they don't go, off on their own down into some wonderland and cause a lot of liability for the director and officers.
Yeah, and I think Rolf talked about the 60-minute board meeting, which I think is probably 15 minutes too long. But
Okay.
he and I talk about that a bit. But I think that the other point about that agenda and the fact that the board is protected from talking about things that are not noticed, I think that gives them a really good tool to say, hey, that's a great idea, and maybe we do need to talk about that at next month's meeting or our next board meeting. But for now, we're required. It gives them a backstop to say we are required by law. We've noticed these 4 items. Those are the only 4 items we're talking about today. So.
Yeah. It's a good fallback too for the board, because sometimes I feel, especially new boards, have a hard time dealing with reining in the owners. If a few owners appear at the meeting and the conversation just goes on and on, it goes off topic, and then I feel like the board members don't know what to do or how to deal with that, so they just let everybody talk about all these different things, and then they risk kind of breaking the law a little bit,
Yep. I forget who the guest was on our show, but they said that they had attended a 6-hour board meeting.
That's about 5.5 hours too long.
That sounds like half the year should have been accomplished. But
once a year board meeting.
Okay, so when we get back, we'll probably brush up a little bit more about the legislation and law regarding...
Let's tell some stories.
Yeah, and then some funny stories regarding some homeowners association meetings.
Callers, if you got anything good, bring it in.
888-923-1380. Please call us and tell us your stories.
Hi, this is Rick Russo, owner of Russo Insurance Agency and Financial Services. We proudly serve Granite Bay, Roseville, Rockland, Sacramento, Lake Tahoe, and the surrounding areas. At Russo Insurance Agency, we like to say, get to know us before you need us. Our insurance agency is built on relationships and trust. If you want to be certain that your most valuable assets are insured correctly, allow us to give you more than just a 15-minute quote. For all your commercial, home, auto, and life insurance needs, call us today at 916-791-1901. That's 916-791-1901, or online at rickrussoinsurance.com. That's rickrussoinsurance.com. Thank you.
With SRN News, I'm Val Dior. The Department of Transportation is taking steps to increase oversight of the nation's public transportation systems. SRN's Linda Kenyon has the story.
The Department of Transportation is proposing the establishment of a public transportation safety program. This new program would allow federal regulators to monitor, oversee, and enforce safety in public transit. The effort follows several safety-related problems on the Washington, D.C. Metro Rail system and on other subways. Those incidents have raised numerous questions about safety. These incidents also have led many lawmakers on Capitol Hill to criticize the metro system in particular and to press for greater federal oversight. Linda Kenyon, SRN News, Washington.
A funeral will be held this afternoon in Arlington, Texas for a college football player shot dead by police. Christian Taylor was unarmed when he was fatally shot August 7th by an Arlington police officer responding to an after-hours burglary call at a car dealership. Video shows Taylor busting out a car windshield windshield and then driving his vehicle into the showroom. The rookie officer who shot the Angelo State University student has been fired. Secretary of State John Kerry marking the historic reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Havana on Friday amid lingering tensions between the two countries and deep concern among anti-Castro lawmakers in Washington. And GOP presidential hopeful Marco Rubio says it is important to understand there is no Cuban economy. He explains.
What there is a massive holding company. It's called GAESA, G-A-E-S-A, and it's run by the Cuban military. They own everything in Cuba. All of the hotels, the telecommunications, the rent-a-cars, the gas stations, every major industry in Cuba is owned or operated by a company held within this larger company called GAESA.
The U.S. flag was hoisted above the American Embassy in Havana for the first time Friday in 54 years. This is SRN News.
Hi, I'm Morgan Fussell. My company, Broadband Agreements, negotiates cable television and broadband right of entry, access, and compensation agreements for your communities. At Broadband Agreements, we offer a free review of all agreements with a signed letter of authorization. Broadband Agreements will improve your community's income and or savings, or you don't pay us a dime. Visit us at broadbandagreements.com. That's broadbandagreements.com. Or call me, Morgan Fussell, directly at 916-939-5026. That's 916-939-5026. Broadband Agreements online at broadbandagreements.com or 916-939-5026.
This is AM 1380, The Answer.
You're listening to the Saturday HOA Brunch presented by Angius&Terry, LLP. And now your hosts, Brad Epstein and Jonathan Broderick on AM 1380, The Answer.
Hey, we're back for the third quarter of our show. It is going to be a, 100-degree day out here in Sacramento?
Triple digit.
And man,
third quarter?
Yeah, third quarter already. Yeah, I'm starting to get into the quarters because it's football season, so but yeah, this hour's just flying by, huh, Garth?
I mean,
it's too fast.
It almost seems like we could, maybe add an additional hour to the show. That's what I'm thinking we need to do.
Let's make it like one of those really fun board meetings that goes on for 6 hours.
Oh, the mock board meeting. Yeah, the 6-hour show. Mock to match the 6-hour board meeting. So
hey, Frank,
maybe talk about national topics in the second hour, huh, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's a possibility. Brainstorm a little bit. It'll take some time to brainstorm and plan for that. But it's always a possibility. It just depends. We don't want to steal all the listenership from the radio stations around the world. So
that's true.
We do have the most exciting topic in America right now, homeowners association. So, Bianna, you wanted to talk a little bit more about minutes?
Yep, about keeping minutes. So the law requires that associations keep minutes of what was discussed at each board meeting, and that these minutes are available to members within 30 days of the meeting. And it could be a draft status of the meetings, a summary, or any other executive session meeting. So you have to make sure that you keep the minutes and also that you provide them to the owners upon request within 30 days of the meeting. Also, the minutes have to be distributed in the annual policy statement. You have to inform the members that they have a right to obtain minutes in that annual policy statement, so that members who missed the meeting and want to know what was discussed know that they have the right to get a copy of that.
So, Vianna, when it comes to the minutes, are the boards or the secretary of the board who's taking are they supposed to be like a transcript of all the discussion, or is it just are they do you recommend that they just have the actionable items with a little bit over? I mean, how do you mix in? Because when you're not at the meeting and there's, hey, we voted 3-4 that we want this new landscape contractor, that doesn't necessarily give the homeowner much input or information about what actually happened. So what's the recommendation on what the minutes should actually contain?
Well, I hope it's not a word-for-word verbatim script of the meeting, especially if it's a 6-hour meeting. You're going to have a 400-page minutes. I think generally most associations keep like a summary of what was discussed. And, we were talking a little bit about at the break that sometimes board members and managers don't know exactly how to interpret what was discussed, because sometimes there's some back and forth. There's a misinterpretation about what each member said and meant by what they said. So I think that's getting too bogged down into the nitty-gritty of what was discussed. So kind of a quick summary of the topic and some of the issues that were discussed themselves. So for example, for a landscaping contract, you'd say the board reviewed 3 bids for contract. They discussed which one had the lowest cost and which one had was proposing the widest scope of work, and they voted 3-1 to pick landscaper A, and that's about it.
So we talked earlier about input from homeowners. There's things like open forum, right? Most board meetings that I've been to, they start out with some open forum, and I've heard everything from an egg timer, like everyone gets 3 minutes because we got 15 minutes to go, and if there's a bunch of people to talk, that they kind of moderate it that way. But in the context of the minutes, if there's items that are brought up in the open forum, are those actionable items that should be contained in the minutes, the official corporate record of the association, or is that more just sort of stuff that happens at the meeting that doesn't necessarily have to be recorded?
Well, I'd say that if there's an open forum part of the meeting, which most associations have, and something was brought up that's of importance and is going to maybe go to be discussed at the next meeting, maybe it should be in there with a little more detail, like homeowners are concerned about the landscaping. At the next meeting, we're going to discuss landscaping. And if somebody's just voicing some concerns over random things, I think they could be sort of overlooked. He could say something like, owners are discussed concern over feral cats in their neighborhood, period.
So the takeaway for our board members, it sounds like, is actionable items definitely need to be recorded. And your advice is to have maybe a little bit of summary discussion about what led to that action. So an open forum item that gets discussed and turns into an actionable item would be recorded, but just random discussion doesn't need it.
And when we say recorded, we mean documented. Notes on pencil and paper, because we don't want to confuse anyone that might be listening in Nevada, because I'm not a suit, but I believe, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but in Nevada, they are actually required by law to record the board meetings and keep them on file for a period of time, correct? Is that true?
I don't know.
I don't know that either.
We're going to have to get
Brad
back to
would
listeners
know.
with that.
Where's Brad when we need him?
But I think there is, and I could be messing everything up. It could be they're required only to record executive session and not the whole meeting. But I do believe that they have that in their legislation for homeowners association. They have to physically record it with a device and store that for a period of time.
That would be an excellent topic for the national. Second hour national
that
show,
would be.
I think.
And then Viana, so when they record these minutes, and then the managers, they have how long do they have until they have to to turn the minutes back over to the board or keep them?
So generally the way it works...
What happens with the minutes?
Yeah, so generally the way it works is that somebody, usually the secretary, but oftentimes the manager, will keep track of what's being discussed at the meeting, and they'll have a summary ready for the next meeting, a draft, basically, summary of the minutes from the last meeting at the next meeting to be approved. So, let's say this week we have a meeting, I write down everything that was discussed, and then I put it in sort of a draft form for the board at the next meeting to approve. And once the board reviews those minutes from last week and it is in compliance with how they remember the discussion going, then they just approve the minutes and it's on file for the association and for the owners to request a copy of.
That makes sense.
Awesome. And accessibility, usually I've seen before in a lot of homeowners associations now that have a website for membership to log in or pay their dues. They'll actually, on these websites, they'll post the previous minutes so that...
Sometimes they do that. Most of the time, some don't, and it's actually up to the owners to request a copy of the minutes, and then the association can recover the cost of copying those minutes. It's usually like 2 pages, so it's 50-cent cost or so. But
right. So what happens when a hockey game breaks out in the middle of a board meeting, Gartha? How do you record all of that stuff? I know you've probably been to some board meetings where there's been some pretty ferocious members that get a little bit excited because we're going to change the tulips into petunias or something. I mean,
yes, there's definitely our this social experiment turned institution has had no shortage of fun and exciting things happening at board meetings. Sometimes tragic things happen at board meetings. It's terrible. People just take it way too seriously. But I have been at a meeting where I walked into the meeting and there was a security guy outside, and I didn't think too much of it. And I sat at the end of the table and kind of at the corner, and the board was across the front of the table, and the manager was on the other end. And there was a gentleman sitting in the very front row, and he just had the death stare on the president. And I kind of picked up on this, and I started thinking maybe this has something to do with security. And the minute the president said, "I'd like to call the board meeting to order," the gentleman jumped out of the front row with an overhand right and hit the president in the chin and knocked him backwards in his chair. Tables are flying. Now, the manager at the meeting...
That's a don't in a board meeting.
That's definitely a don't. We definitely want to put that on a don't. The manager is 110 pounds soaking wet with all her gear on. And she jumped on that guy's back, and she was wailing on him. And so me and the other board members are trying to pull her off. She's got his hair. The security guy comes rushing in. They put him in cuffs. They take him out.
Wow.
And to the credit of the board president, he said we should.
Took it pretty good.
He took it great because they wanted to call the meeting because of all the excitement, and the manager's like, we got to call the meeting, and the board president said, no. That's what that guy wanted. We're here to do some business. He straightened out his shirt. He sat back down. We set up the tables, and it was one of the most pleasant meetings I've ever been to.
And what was this member so agitated?
I hope it was about a landscaping contract.
No one really knows. That's the beauty of the mystery, because he had called the president, he'd called the manager and said, I've got some complaints to register at the meeting.
And he did.
He registered his complaint with an overhand right, and he didn't say anything. The interesting thing is he wouldn't tell anybody what he wanted to talk about, and they said open forum, beginning of the meeting, no problem. You have, depending on how many people there, it could be 3 minutes, could be 10 minutes. We have 15 minutes for open forum. You can speak your piece then. If it's an actionable item, we'll take it into the next step, put on the agenda. His actionable item was an overhand right over the top of the table.
And so this 110-pound soaking wet manager, a female, male?
Yes.
Female.
The guy was 175, 180, and she basically just wailed on him.
She just put a rear naked choke on him and tried to break up the altercation.
He got one shot, and she got about 10 good ones. Now, I play hockey. I've been in glove dropping altercations. I was kind of excited about maybe adding that guy to the roster, and then I saw the manager go, and I'm like, we definitely got to add her to our roster. There's the enforcer right there.
I don't know very many management companies yet that teach self-defense.
Maybe that's a training tool for us. Maybe on the National Ignite training tour, we should train self-defense at board meetings.
Maybe we can get Chuck Norris to come with us to a few lunch and learns and see if we can get him in there. Walker, Texas Ranger.
He can be the spokesman for orderly board meetings, maybe.
There we go. And then beyond what do you have you've had some experience with hearings and board meetings, and what would be a funny situation, hopefully not a physical altercation, that you've dealt with recently?
Actually, what I see happening a lot is that owners quite often don't understand what goes on at board meetings. They don't understand. They're not really very informed sometimes. And what I see happen a lot is that owners really want to come and vent. They just need their 5 minutes to vent. And if the board members keep calm generally and allow the owner to vent, actually give them the 5 minutes to talk and voice their complaints, things calm down really quickly after that. So what I see boards doing a lot is try to squash the complaints part of the session, but sometimes people need that. So what I've seen happen is people will come in, guns blazing, just like screaming and
huffing
yelling
and puffing.
Yeah, you just smile and nod while they yell for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden things just calm down. It's weird how that happens, but I see it quite often.
Jeez. And we talked about the Southern California. There was an altercation where a gentleman wanted to break into the executive session, and they had to force him out. So obviously the police were called, and then the news affiliates down in the region had to, of course, run this big story and put everything out there. So what else do you have, Garth? You got any other good altercations that you've experienced? Or
well, some of the content that we teach around the country is exactly what Viana's saying is active listening, and if the member is going up in pitch and volume, you're going down. So I've got some good ironic stories too about things that sort of went wrong at a special assessment meeting. It looks like we're headed to a break, so why don't we get to that story when we get back? And we'd love to have any of our callers call in, any of our manager friends call in and give us some good stories.
Or Mom, can you call, hook us up with a question or something? I don't know. Well, anyways, we're going to go to break, and then we're going to come back for Crunch Time, and we're going to chit-chat a little bit more with our guests, Garth Leone and Viana Barbu.
The challenges presented by today's economy and rebounding housing market is forcing many homeowners association boards of directors to operate their HOAs more like a business. It's a balancing act of trying to stay solvent and still provide homeowners with quality amenities and services. One of the main challenges HOA boards are facing is attempting to recover unpaid HOA fees owed by delinquent homeowners. Collection efforts are often very time-consuming. If you want to get the HOA fees collection monkey off of your back, call ATC Assessment Collection Group. ATC is an attorney-supervised collection company, providing collection and foreclosure services to HOAs in both California and Nevada's most recognizable communities. Get back to what you actually volunteered to do as an HOA board member. Effectively oversee your community. Call ATC today at 916-641-1410. That's 916-641-1410. Online at atcacg.com. That's atcacg.com. ATC Assessment Collection Group.
News, News, opinion, insight. AM 1380, The Answer.
You're listening to the Saturday HOA Brunch presented by Angius&Terry, LLP. And now your hosts, Brad Epstein and Jonathan Broderick on AM 1380, The Answer.
All right, here we go. We are ready for the last segment of our show, unfortunately. But, hey, it's been fun thus far, right?
Terrific. I think we were talking about, we want to get into a discussion about fiduciary responsibility,
That's
right?
important, right?
And we were talking about how to keep the meetings on track and professional and on topic. We use an acronym called APE, Asset Protection and Enhancement. It's a tool that board members and the managers can use. If the conversation goes away from something that's impacting asset protection and enhancement, they can kind of bring it back around. And under fiduciary duty, I had another interesting situation. We were attending a board meeting that was facing either a massive special assessment.
Ooh, those are exciting, right?
Those are no fun. They definitely get all the members at the meeting though, or a bank loan. So I was there because they had some insurance issues. They were getting a lot of claims. Their insurance were going up because they had deferred maintenance on roofs and siding. The attorneys were there. The bankers were there to talk about the options of borrowing the money. And we're into the discussion, and the banker is the board president setting up like, we've got to do this, and we're probably going to have to raise assessments, and this is going to be a financial hardship for all of us, and we're here to see if it's better to loan or special assess, and you might be able to do just the one-time payment and not have so kind of teeing it up for what had to happen. And
giving them some options.
And some guy in the back of the room stood up and said, I was the board president for 10 years, and not once did I have to raise assessments. Not once. In 10 years I have to raise assessment. And immediately, in the middle of the room, a big burly guy stood up and turned around and said, so in other words, you're the reason we're here tonight, right? And that guy sat right down. And fiduciary duty, I have yet to see a set of documents that says the number one job of the board of directors is to save money. But for some reason, they think that's what it's about. And that's not what it's about. It's about asset protection and enhancement. And unfortunately, when you have a physical plant, that costs money, right?
Right. So a fiduciary duty is really the board member's duty to act in the best interest of the association as a whole, and in the best interest of the members as a whole. And that generally does not include saving money. Oftentimes, you're going to have to spend more money, maybe increase assessments to prepare for the future to make sure that those property values are maintained. And a part of that fiduciary duty is making informed decisions. Board members have the right to rely on experts when they don't know that area that they're considering for the future, like possibly a landscaping contract like we talked before, or insurance. So they have the right to hire an expert and make an informed decision based on what that expert is recommending. And it sounds like that board member that was president for 10 years did none of that. So that's definitely a breach of the fiduciary.
He didn't. And the thing that you bring up about reliance, it's not only a right, but I think it offers them a measure of protection, correct? And in other words, if they, I think and I'm, like I said, I'm no attorney. I can barely carry Viana's briefcase, but I have stayed at Holiday Inn Express, so maybe I know something.
Night?
But yeah, no, not last night, but many nights. But I think that the point is that it's a measure of protection for them as well. If I was a board member, because there's something about breaching your duty if you operate outside the scope of your expertise, right?
Right.
And so if I don't know anything about landscaping and landscape contracting, I'm going to be looking to that professional manager or
get an expert
and say, what do you think? And then follow the advice of the expert. So it should be pretty easy for us to make those kinds of decisions. But I know boards don't seem to do that. So
yeah, oftentimes they don't. And we have to do there's a word of caution out there, because reliance entirely on experts, and if you're really not doing any due diligence to understand what those experts are saying, ultimately you are responsible. So it offers a measure of protection to some degree, but at the same time, board members can't just say, well, you're the expert, whatever you think. I mean, it's still the board member's ultimate decision, but you want to make sure that you get some opinions out there from somebody who is an expert in the field.
And I don't want to overstate the obvious, but what is the average salary of a board member that runs a nonprofit corporation and has to keep the community moving forward and aesthetically appealing? What does anybody know?
Yeah, it's out there. It's so high. It's about zero.
Absolutely, it's all volunteer.
They're all volunteer board members.
When someone stands up and punches a board president in the face, I don't understand what that person's thinking.
Yeah, that poor guy probably already worked an 8 to 10 hour day and then is showing up having to do all this due diligence, reviewing contracts, talking to managers, trying to make an informed decision for zero money.
And bam, here comes the right hook.
Yeah.
Overhand
exactly.
right over the top of the table.
Oh, man, that's just horrible. So yeah, like everyone needs to know, and if most people do know, but they operate as a corporation. Most associations are incorporated, right, Bianna? And they're nonprofit. They're
nonprofit corporations with volunteer boards.
Volunteer boards.
Yeah, and when we talk about this subject across the country, and like I said, I've participated in hundreds of meetings about meetings, and the thing that the separation, there needs to be a separation between this is our home, right? These are our homes. So it's a little bit tough to totally separate the emotional side of things when it comes to dealing with your home. But there is a business element to these associations. And that's what we talked about earlier, asset protection and enhancement. That needs to be the driving factor behind the way the board conducts itself and conducts itself in accordance with the local laws and making sure they're taking care of business. And so it's trying to separate out that. To me, that's why it's the greatest social experiment there is, right? It's a clash of the ultimate privacy in your own private property mixed with it's community association property, and we're going to have behavior management and architectural uniformity, which is totally anti-Castleitis. So
yeah, it's definitely a strange experiment. What I want to talk about briefly before we go is how to handle attacks from owners at a board meeting. How board members
can pepper spray,
heavy security.
Yeah, that insurance has to be increased before you start carrying tasers at board
Marty
meetings,
McSorley.
Yeah, so a lot of times in the open forum part of the meeting, owners will just come and start attacking the board because, again, sometimes they're not informed, sometimes they're just upset. So what can you do if at the open forum part of the meeting, owners just start screaming, yelling, attacking you? And I think one of the best things to remember is to not take it personally as a board member, because these owners are upset probably for a reason, and it's generally upset with the management of the association, not the actual managers, but just with what's happening in their community. It's not necessarily that they're upset with you.
It's not personal.
Yeah, so you have to kind of...
Sometimes it is, apparently, though.
Yeah.
When a boxing match breaks out.
Apparently so.
And remembering that also the open forum session is for owners to make comments. So this is the entire purpose of having that part of the meeting. So if people are voicing their opinions, it's their right to do during that time. And also remembering that just because somebody's making a comment doesn't mean that it warrants a response. I think board members sometimes, especially ones that are kind of new, want to respond to everything and then start engaging in a screaming match back and forth or some kind of argument.
Yeah, screaming solves everything, right?
Yeah. So oftentimes, if an owner is making a comments or is screaming and yelling, doesn't necessarily warrant a response. You kind of let them yell and say thank you for your time. Move on.
Well, Garth, the last time you were on the show, you said you were moving into semi-retirement, right? Doing a little bit of coaching and teaching, but here you are, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on a balmy day in studio with us.
Yes, semi-retired. I've been trying to semi-retire since I was about 27, so I think I'll probably live the rest of my life as semi-retired. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can live that way, then more power to you. Well, I mean, Garth, thanks for coming down, huh? Last-minute call-up, just came down here and you just crushed it again.
It was an honor to get called up to the big leagues. I've been practicing on my own radio show in my garage since I was on here last, so it's just good to see that the management has seen what I've been doing down in the minors and decided to give me the big call up when in the injury in the absence of Mr. Brad. So.
Yeah, Mr. Brad Epstein. We wish him safe travels to the Bay Area for his family function. Vianna, you did a great job again. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of consistency with this. Is 2 weeks in a row without a camping trip?
Thank goodness she was here.
Yeah, I skipped camping just for you guys.
Yeah.
I was excited to be here.
All right. Well, I'm going to give a shout out because I know at least my mom's listening. We didn't get any callers, but we'll try again next week, and we hope that you took something away from the show. Love you, Ma.